everyone. So I know today with Miss Sutherland you have been learning about primary sources and secondary sources, and these relate to your history that you're learning. And whenever you learn about history in school or in later life, you will always need primary and secondary sources to help you to find out more about what you are researching. So let's just recap what a primary source is and what a secondary source is. So remember, a primary source is something or someone who was there at the time, or something that was made at the time. So that person was at the event in history, they witnessed it, they saw it, and they can tell you exactly what happened from their memory because they were there. Or it might be someone has written a book or an article, but they wrote it at the time and therefore it was a first-hand account because they were there when it happened and they wrote it down straight away afterwards for us to learn about in the future. Whereas a secondary source is something that is once removed from a primary source. So what we mean by that, excuse me, what we mean by that is it's not necessarily written by somebody it's not written by someone who was there at the time. It might be written by somebody who spoke to someone who was there at the time. It might be written by somebody who has researched lots of primary sources and learnt about the historical event and decided to write their own book. So secondary sources are things that weren't written at the time of the event, they were written later, and they're written by people who weren't there at the time but have learnt from people that were. So that's the difference. So your task today to deepen your learning and your understanding of primary and secondary sources is to be able to look at the pictures that Miss Sutherland has asked you to sort, but to be able to justify how you know they are a primary source or a secondary source. So I've got, just like on Blue Peter, here's one I prepared earlier. I have stuck in my journal a picture here of Michael Fish. He is the gentleman, if you remember, who delivered the weather forecast the night before the storm. And here we have an article from the internet, which was written quite recently and was telling everybody about the Great Storm, but it wasn't written at the time. So I wonder if you can have a 5-second think. Which one of these is a primary source and which one is a secondary source? Ready? 5 minutes, 5-second think. This one is I hope you said a primary source because Michael Fish was there at the time. He delivered that weather report, and even though we can watch that now, it was filmed back in 1987 when the Great Storm took place. And this one is hopefully you said secondary source, because this is written a lot later, and whoever's written this article has done things like maybe watched Michael Fish's weather report, maybe they've read a book or a diary from the time, and they've then written their own report about it. Okay, so when you've got your pictures stuck in your book, what I want you to do next to them is to write your justification. So your reason why you know, how do you know that this one is a primary source? Okay, so I'm going to write next to mine, this is a primary source because Michael Fish was there at the time of the storm, and this was filmed in 1987. So I am telling you that I think it is a primary source, but I'm not just saying that, I'm then justifying. I am saying why and how I know that it is a primary source by using some evidence to prove that this is a primary source of information. And then I'm going to do the same for my secondary source. So I'm going to say for this article, I'm going to say this is a secondary source because it wasn't written at the time, but primary sources were used to make it, or primary sources were researched to write it. And I know that that's true as well, because in 1987, which was way before I was born, they didn't have the internet and there weren't websites. So we can know straight away that this isn't a primary source from 1987 as well, because websites weren't invented back in 1987. They weren't invented until a few years later. So I know straight away this can't be a primary source because the internet wasn't around in that time. So that's another reason as well. So notice how I have used my beautiful, neatest handwriting. I've really shown care in my work by writing in a straight line with my neatest joined up handwriting. And I have made sure I have stuck my pictures in nice and straight. So I'm really showing pride in my learning. And I have made sure that I want my work to be the best it can be. So I've written some really good detailed reasons justifying why I know. Okay, so remember that your deepening task, your deepening tutorial helps you to show you have that real deeper understanding, that real brilliant knowledge of what you're learning about. So you need to show and prove to me and Miss Sutherland that you do have that knowledge by writing really detailed descriptions. Okay? You're going to have some other pictures to do, and I look forward to coming and having a look at your journals later and seeing what you have written and what your justifications are. I will see you soon. Bye.